Alright, another draft physics video production. Alright, so comments, and then I'll attempt to explain to people interested in creating a simulation, computer, what the parameters are, what variables you need to control, you need to have a controllable variable for, because you'll have to nuance the whatever to get it to work, just because you can't do the real density of the universe thing. So, you have to do as close as possible in terms of modeling it. So some of just the basic rules of the function, but I'll probably go into some of that on these comments, frankly. So Tea Party LA, which I really hate that name. Tea Party, defender of religious kooks. What are your thoughts about the functionality of the rodent coil? Well, speaking of religion, so this is this hyperberloid philosophy crap, donut. And you wrap a coil in two coils in opposite directions. So you wrap one going kind of this way, and then you wrap the other one crossing that coil, as I understand it. And people have modified it, in terms of how tightly they wind it and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, but the thing about coils, this is like sort of important to understanding the fundamental mechanisms that exist, is, as I've explained, a coil, coil, what you have to think of is not how you see it when it's drawn. Well, that's just too much, and that didn't help. Okay. Yeah. That doesn't help. There's some angle I have to change here. Well, we'll worry about it later. You'll figure it out. Maybe. Maybe over here. Tilt it this way. Well, that's a little better. All right. Anyway, it's technical issues. Always something. When it's drawn, it's never drawn the way you wrap a coil. I mean, your coils are, wrapped very tight, so all the little stuff is all smashed together, going around. And you have to kind of think of life inside. This is always something. All right, I will solve this technical issue because it's sort of glaring and obvious and needs repair. Yeah, it seems a little better. We'll have to say okay. Anyway, see, if you think of life inside the coil, so if you're inside the coil, you could sort of understand that if I was on this wall of the coil, what do I see? I see a bunch of other wire, okay, looking at me. And if you understand, like I said, the basic principle of what I'm arguing, is that you have to sort of understand that, the world of reflection means something different than what we kind of think. You think about things just hitting things and then bouncing off, and that's it. But that's not really what happens inside of matter. What's really happening is, electrons are making an exchange. This for a guy going this way. So when it's exchanging the energy, and by exchanging it, it changes what its disposition is, because it's giving away this and it's adding this, and that's going to change which way it moves. And then the catch is that as it moves into more force, because it's moving towards the stuff coming at it. It's moving away from the stuff coming at it from behind, and just by laws of probability, it's going to hit more of the stuff in front of it than hit the stuff behind it, and it's going to make the same exchanges, and that means it's going to stop. And then when it stops, when it goes the other way, that means it will make this exchange again. It'll give back, this forward thing, as it stops. So, almost taking back this relationship. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. It's conservational, but this fact that all the matter is like a little battery, and it's a buffer against current events. It has a history, you could argue. So anyway, that just makes it it seems simple enough. A reflection isn't a reflection. So the point is that when you throw something inside a coil, you can have a clear expectation that it's coming right back at you. In the sense that it'll make an exchange with the atoms on this side of the coil. The same thing will come back at you, and what are you going to do when you get hit by it? You're going to do the same thing. You're going to throw it back at him, and he's going to throw it back at you. So what's happening inside of a coil is you're getting this idea of an infinite reflection. Now, it's not infinite because none of this stuff is perfect, and stuff does get through without hitting any electrons in the right way, and blah, 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 blah. So it does leak out. Okay, so you get a little bit of something out here, very weak. But you get a lot stronger in here because the pressure gets much higher, in the sense you have lots and lots of reflections. And it's basically, this is all paramagnetic, meaning that when you hit it, it creates a little bit of magnetism, it polarizes the atoms. So they're getting polarized, on, off with their polarization. So anyway, so this idea is if you take this coil, and I don't know if I can fit it in here, so it's this whole stupid donut thing. Like I said, your coils, one coil loops around this way, another coil loops around this way. And you put 100 watts into it, kind of a lot of energy. You can get a little ball to spin around in here. Big deal. It's not that interesting. And it's just because now you're changing the phase. So obviously it's not a straightforward reflection. So you have some reflections that are straight back, with the donut. And then you have other reflections that are at an angle. And those are going to be out of phase with each other because they're in the different coils. And so, frequency starts becoming important, all that kind of stuff in terms of creating effects. And it's really about resonant. It's the resonance of your reflections that you're really controlling. It's the timing of them. So that's probably enough on that subject. But it's just important the idea of seeing the world differently. Like I say, for my 50 years of my life, 55, I saw the world. I thought of reflections as that's it. There's no energy transfer, but there has to be. But the transfer is subtle. Conservation just tells you if the same force comes in, the same force goes out, you're done. But it's really not true if you're making exchanges. Because there's you can release something that you picked up on the street last week. You don't have to do this pure exchange. You can fool it. You can let something go that was 1,000,000 years old. And just pretend you let go of something. You reflected something. When you didn't reflect it, you readmitted something older. An older piece of energy. I don't know how exactly to say it, but those of you who can will follow along. And those of you who can't will not. All right, Robert Ritchie. So I'm going to pick on a sentence just because, it's too simple. You can choose to believe Ken or not. Well, first off, we do not choose anything. Okay, your interaction with the world chooses for you. That's just a fact. Your history chooses for you. And it's not a choice, it's a decision. So your history decides what you do. Just a fact. Okay, if you learned how to play the piano, you play the piano. If you didn't learn how to play the piano, you don't play the piano. You don't choose to play the piano. And you don't even when you know how to do something, you don't choose when you do it. None of it. We're not playing a choice game. We're playing a program game, and you're programmed by your experience. So the people who believe Ken or not are believing him because they're dupes or fools or idiots or morons. And it doesn't really have anything to do with a choice. They have some kind of thought pattern where they're saying, I don't need what he says to make sense. He can describe buildings like making a building, and he can describe putting the front door 3 stories up with no staircase, right? And you can have all the windows underground. you could do something completely doesn't make any sense, and to these people, they don't care. They're so preoccupied with tying their pink slippers the right way or some kind of bizarre shit. They're so preoccupied with some kind of mush that they don't even recognize buildings that you can't get into, or that the windows look at dirt. They don't even notice. They're so distracted by their bullshit, or they're seeking God. So that brings back this rodent coil. I think this is the guy. Rodent guy was some sort of Buddhist idiot who was into numerology. So there's a lot of that in the Ken stuff, right? So this whole hyperburloid crap, I guess, is something to do with numerology and blah, 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 and all kinds of... It's just a religion. The hyperburloid religion. All right, so you say, I choose not. So again, like I said, you don't choose not. You're just sitting there saying, well, Ken Wheeler says a lot of shit, but I can't make a model of it. It doesn't make any sense. If I made a car based on Ken Wheeler's engineering design, the steering wheel would be where the back tire is, the rear bumper would be where the steering wheel is supposed to be, the seats would be upside down. There'd be no way you could drive it, because it doesn't make any sense, and it's certainly not simple. It's insanely complicated. A bunch of this and tornadoes and all kinds of shit, and where does all that crap come from? Who the hell fucking knows? So this isn't a choice thing where you're saying, well, flip a coin. You're indecisive. Oh, I can't tell whether it's reasonable or not. Frankly, I can tell it's so fucking obviously not reasonable. But anyway, moving on. Something off the subject, I assume. I see the word Jordan Peterson. What the fuck could he have to do with any of my videos? I know Jordan Peterson made his fame and his following and his fortune by specifically targeting and knocking down the weak in a way that caused everyone around him other than the weak to laugh. Well, the whole world is turned into this. I mean, the worst kind of nihilist, pig, ignorant slob they elected president of the United States just to get back at the Mexicans. Just because I hate immigration, but just because they hate immigration, they threw away all reasonable judgment. And it's sad. It's sad that, the only other alternative party has ruined itself by saying silly stuff like everybody has to take care of everybody else, even though, the world's problems. And when those world problems are symptoms of bad behavior, having 10 kids when you live on a garbage dump. Well, you can't let a bunch of people like that into your country. If that's what the huddled masses are going to do, the huddled masses can't live here, okay, because they'll turn this place into a shithole. It's just, So I'm just saying that, it's... Jordan Peterson is just a symptom of people being sick of bullshit. And so they're just scapegoating. They're just, this scapegoating bullshit that somehow some kind of liberal thoughts are what created immigration when it was entirely created by Ronald Reagan, in the sense that he's the one who said, oh, yeah, this illegal stuff is bad, so let's double how many legal people we let in. But they're not going to become citizens. They're just going to do a work visa thing, and then they're going to overstay their visa, and they're never going to learn to speak English or any of that shit, and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, Neil deGrasse Tyson does the same thing. I don't know if he does. I wouldn't put the two in the same category at all, but whatever. Bill Nye does the same thing. Whatever. Where do you get this shit from? Sorry, you're just scapegoating. Blame the world's problems on these idiots. They're reflections of the society. They're not causes of the society. And what the hell's your problem with Bill Nye? He's kind of milquetoast. What did he do to offend you? He was pro-nuclear power or something? What is it? What's your problem with him? If you are not a part of the university, then you must find a way to garner attention outside the merit of your discussion. Look, the idea is that complete bullshit matters to people. Okay? President has sex in the hallway. It matters to people. Stupid stuff matters to people. And that's what runs the world, is some stupid stuff. So yeah, I haven't fell into the right stupid stuff. I've done plenty of stupid stuff. I'm, in many ways, in the right circumstance. Yes, there's so much to be notorious for and all that kind of stuff. But I just haven't done anything, bad timing, whatever you want to say. Wrong nut job at the wrong time. Ben Shapiro was unknown until he started making fun of SJWs and feminists. Again, it's not just because somebody makes fun. It's because there's an audience that's sick to shit of it. And it's that simple. The cliches get boring really fast. Okay, so if the SJWs are going to just ask to be ridiculed by being so fucking silly, all right, and say things that are so preposterously exaggerated and stupid, then yeah, they're going to give people who are sick of them ammunition. So yes, if you're going to hand them the bullets, they're going to shoot them at you. Fuck. And now he's a warmongering little piece of subatomic. Yeah, I'll stop there. I don't know who Ben Shapiro is, so I really couldn't give a shit. Anyway, I recommend that hit pieces change to draw audience. Whatever. Even if the audience is drawn by those head pieces are composed of low caliber thinking numbers attract attention of people who put weight in numbers. It's really not my objective, so frankly I wish to skirt whatever mid-line there is in terms of my rhetoric. And I'm sick of playing games. I'm sick of modifying language or doing this or doing that to suit people's little particular hysterias. I'm sick of it. If words scare you, then go the fuck away. Okay? I just don't have any patience for all this bullshit. And as we know, mainstream science loves its big numbers, whatever. And actually, you would be surprised at how many professors will jump on a $6,000 figure. No, you'd be surprised. So that's just more horseshit to debate someone. No, they're afraid. So why? It's not a. Well, frankly, I'm not going to pay him $6,000. That's outrageous for a few hours work. Fuck that. Again, unless there's a famous celebrity scientist. And if you ask enough of them, they will start talking about you on their stupid YouTube channels. Well, that's not going to happen either. Again, if they had a counter argument, if they could pick on me as easy as they could pick on a flat earther, then maybe some of that would be happening. But you can't get a single person, right? I put a challenge to the audience here, and there's plenty of haters here, right? Well, why don't you just explain how electrons and protons don't fit the definition of magnetic monopoles? How that's not exactly how they function in reality. That if you put two of them together, they're exactly going to behave exactly like a magnet would behave in an environment of charges. No, it's not a complex challenge, is it? No. Have we seen any kind of response at all? No. And that will garner more attention for your name. I hate to say all this advice. I could really, just shove it, frankly. You people aren't smarter than me. So I'm going to do a Feynman to you. And I'm going to say, what, you haven't thought that I've thought about some way to scheme myself some attention? Well, I don't want to scheme the attention. I don't want to cheat to get it. I hate to say it, but there is a game out there and it must be played. I don't think it must be. And whatever the game is, it's so stupid that if you had a plan, it would fail. Okay? Because it runs on accidents. It doesn't run on plans. Hoops must be jumped through, and yes, it does feel meaningless and degrading. But that is how this ridiculous world run by sociopaths works for now. Well, again, this is not something I don't already know. So thanks, but whatever. Hopefully we will see society return to meritocracy. Well, yeah, there's no hope of that happening anytime soon. But I sincerely doubt it that will ever happen. Well, there's no merit to too many people. Obviously, people will take jobs where they're harassing their neighbors with spam phone calls. They'll try to sell them something for twice the price they know they could get it somewhere else. People have no ethics. People, not society. People. I could try to contribute to this conversation, but I'm on your side and have no merit in government or university physics. I spent my time getting a PhD in social psychology. Yeah, well, I sort of ragged on that a few times. But anyway, yes, that's just babble. Or do I mean wasted my time? Yes, unfortunately. Hopefully I have not wasted your time. Well, I don't know. Frankly, this is a little bit far afield. It's worth lamenting that, we should have a more sophisticated system of I don't know how to say it, but how intelligence filters itself. The intelligent people should know how to filter arguments and make the best rise to the top, and the intelligent people don't seem to have any of those standards. And that's sort of why science lost all its credibility, because it lets certain assholes just raise their hand and say, my brain just farted a thought. Let's make it a fact. Dark matter, comes from nothing. Multiverse, just some kind of bullshit idea that can't really survive scrutiny. And they just never scrutinize it. They just jump on a bandwagon. Just how they engineer their experiments. Like I say, you can see all these MIT experiments. They look pristine. I mean, they look like, oh yeah, this is a great experiment. But they've engineered it because they know it doesn't work when they do it a certain way. So it's like putting the audio tone on the radar and doing different things. It's engineered, to give the effect, to prove a point. And but it's really not being fair to the science because they know better. All right. It's like Professor Lewin arguing that in 2 videos he's doing, in 2 lectures, just 2 lectures away. 13 he says one thing, 16 he says something else. So in 13 he says it's a standing wave. In 16 he says, no, it's a moving wave. I mean, using the same technology to prove the point. And he just changes his position from the antenna. And it's like, doesn't make any sense. I mean, they don't even fact check themselves. All right, anyway, just a thought while watching this. I don't believe for a second atoms and their building blocks are like marbles moving around. Well, I don't know why you don't believe that. I don't think they're like marbles moving around in the sense that, my gripe in the standard model, so just to make it clear again how simple my changes are. They're not dramatic changes. They're kind of simple. So the standard model of this clumpy nucleus with protons in it, the extra bit, is extra protons, proton heavy, and then you have these negative charges some distance from that nucleus held in some sort of balance to keep them at those distances. My argument is that this electron is not circling like an orbit. It's not going around and around at 400 million feet a second or whatever. As Biz has pointed out, electrons can't maintain velocity anyway, so it's nonsense. Outside of an atom, they certainly can't. So they don't have what the Earth has, which is a velocity engine that keeps them moving. They can't keep it moving in an accelerator. They can't keep an electron going around and around and around. They have to keep pumping energy into the electron to keep it moving. So anyway, the moving model is stupid. But what electrons are doing is vibrating. They go over here, and they go over here, and they go over here, and they go over here. So they get little hits of acceleration in different directions, and they shudder. So they're always shuddering in their positions, in tension with each other. So when this one shudders, this one feels it, and this one feels it, and this one feels it, and they all get shuddery. And they start causing each other to shudder even more. So they're vibrating in these positions. They're not buzzing around somewhere. So when 2 atoms are joined, so here's a proton, nuclei, whatever. Well, you can't see that. You can barely see this. Yeah, so when there's a, where was I going with that? When there's an atom, don't know what thought I was, but the point is they're in positions. They're not, so when they're shared, so if there's another proton here, nucleus, and they're sharing an electron, they're literally sharing it. Okay, this is the positions. Okay, the atoms are locked into each other, and these things might vibrate, they might move around a little bit, all that kind of stuff, but they're not doing any, this isn't going around here and then come back around here and doing, none of that crap is happening. Alright, so I don't know what you're saying exactly. Like marbles moving around. Well, there are like marbles, and in my opinion, so, there are things with momentum that move. It's pretty much a marble. But anyway, neither does anyone else, I hope. I don't know what that even means, again, so you were too inspecific for me to say, oh yes, so true. No, I'm not going to say that. They are all force fields. They're all fields of force. So, these are sort of important distinctions. The force is always there, and all you do is change its composition. You put more red over here, that means there's more black over there, this kind of thing. You just make exchanges in the force to change its dynamic, but it's not, the fields don't go away or come back or that kind of thing. It always goes somewhere. If there's less force in a field, that means there's more force somewhere else. All right. More complicated than we thought from the beginning. Well, I don't know who we are. Obviously there was only a few people that had this idea of particulating in any real sense momentum to explain gravity, and then they completely jumped off that boat when they went with their bent crap. Their bent geodesic is somehow making it happen. Alright, apparently doing things we don't understand. So again, this we thing, I'm not in that club, so I always understood from the beginning that their story sounds like shit. The right answer is not what they're saying, it's just too silly. Alright, a human consists of carbon and a few other elements. So what does this have to do with anything? 3% nitrogen, 2% calcium, metals, aluminum, this, yeah, sure, okay, fine. Who cares? Combine these atoms a certain way and they can have a discussion about themselves. Well, obviously it's not really the combining of the elements. It's more about arrangements of elements that have function. So, if you could theoretically replace the carbon with silicon, or you could do this, or you could do that. You could find some other way to make it work. I mean, the composition of the computer is very different than my composition, but obviously it now has a function. Okay, it's not doing the feeling thing, but it's sort of doing the thinking thing. Even come up with ideas about how to make a bomb and split atoms into smaller pieces. Well, that's all very poetic, but utterly meaningless to me. Sorry. Okay, perv action. Yeah, I was really sloppy, fast and loose with my assertions about chemistry. The simplicity of atoms plus pressure seduced me into it. I see. I don't see. Well, anyway, I don't know what's your point. Atoms, and the idea that the atoms have pressure inside and outside makes sense to me. But I got the point somewhat across. I don't know, did you? I don't know what point you made. In essence, are these frequencies that always leave the electron bounce back? We'll do it one more time. I'll have to do it again for the simulation anyway, but it's an exchange. So I gave you an analogy, a boat analogy. And the simple point is the electron is a boat, okay, and it has rowers in it. and the rowers have a direction. They're rowing. You know, this guy's going this way, this guy's going that way, this guy's going that way, whatever. And you're in a sea, so the boat doesn't, there's no motors, there's just rowers. So if I have 3 rowers going this way and 2 rowers going that way, the boat's going to go this way a little bit. And if I make another exchange and it's 5-1, well, then the boat's going to go faster that way. And to slow down, it's going to have to do the opposite thing, which is it's going to have to change the rowers the other way around. That means it's going to have to give away a rower this way, throw him back in, and he's going to put a new rower in that's going that way. Right? And now he's going to slow down. And then if I do it again, he's going to change his direction. So the reflection is not a reflection, it's an absorption. You're consuming it, you're taking it from the environment, and you're giving the environment back something. And so it's not like it bounces off. It's changing the disposition of the electron while it's interacting. And if this thing is moving, if it has an imbalance that has it moving in it, oh wow, that's really off the screen. Okay, I didn't even come close. That's funny. So anyway, just you could do it just from the motions I was making. You could just fill in the blanks. Anyway, if this electron has motion, as I'm pointing out, it goes into more field, so it's going to lose rowers based on how much velocity it has and how many rowers are in the water it's heading into. So if I'm inside a coil and there's lots of rowers that I'm heading into, I'm going to lose my speed much quicker because the density is higher. So, and each time one of these guys jumps in, you know, this guy jumps back out. That's the new frequency. So another guy jumps in, this guy jumps out. That's the frequency. So the rate at which the field rebalances me, so that's a key word, rebalance, right? Electrons and protons are under constant pressure to be rebalanced, because if they move into the field, they hit more field, they're forced to stop moving. So they're constantly under the pressure to stop moving. So as much as I'm trying to emphasize the fact that they're always moving a little bit, the system, the field, is always tending to take that away just because of this simple principle. If you're moving into a direction, you're going to get hit by more stuff opposing that direction. It's just the drag argument. Well, I have to remember to draw smaller and closer. Sorry. All right. So where was I? Okay. And ones that knock it, and the ones that knock it. So there's no knocking it. You either reflect, which means you absorb and readmit, or you deflect, which means you don't do a damn thing. You just change something going this way and you make it go that way, or you make it go that way. So there's just those two interactions. There's deflection, and then there's exchange. I just can't say it any clearer, I don't think. But now that I think about it, I can kind of answer it myself by recognizing a push is a push is a push. Well, it's the whole point of what I'm saying is it really isn't, in the sense that a reflection is a push. Okay, that also accounts for photons crossing paths towards the same electron. I don't know where you're going with this. While respecting the speed always being the same, the bits all being the same size, etc. Well, the point is that it's momentum at a frequency. Photons aren't anything mysterious. They're just momentum at a frequency. They're bullets at a frequency. And they reflect, and the reflection is really an absorption. New bullet goes in to the boat, is now, in a sense, it's not going to get where it's going because now it's trapped, moving the boat. and something else that was going the other way, trapped, is released. So an old thing is shot back. The thing isn't reversed in its direction. The new thing jumps in. An old thing jumps out. Okay. Let's see. If I were to recruit a programmer for a take on your simulation, is there a place where I could look up the exact instructions on behavior of the bits and the forces? Yes, I'll answer that at the end of the video. And how would you identify your theory's success? Well, you'll identify it by the fact that it does what I say it does, which is the charges move together in the right way, and then you can make a dipole, and you can make other dipoles behave the way magnets are supposed to behave, and all that kind of crap. By what shapes they arrange into, yes, that would be part of it, and you'd start making, start with a nitrogen and then make a helium and hydrogens and blah 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 and work your way up. Planets, clouds, and galaxies, well, I'm not going to worry about that kind of crap. As I've pointed out, the small universe is the only universe. All that crap is emergent from the function of the small universe. Would it have to be so vastly zoomable? Yeah, well, the limitations of computers are the limitations. You can only make it so dense and so zoomable. So it's a nice feature to have, but frankly, you're probably going to just have to rerun the program with new variables to simulate bigger objects and bigger objects and bigger objects. One critical factor would be the overall light density of space. As long as the proportions remain reasonable, I don't think it's going to be critical. So I'm arguing for a certain density of energy in the external universe, clearly, that's pressurizing everything. But it really just has to do with the argument that, see, the boat could be 1 million, rowers. Okay, could be. Got a million? Let's see, million is 1,000, and that's, well, yeah, that's 1 million. So it could be 1 million in reality, and this could be 1 trillion out here, that hit the boat every second or something. All I have to do is get this relationship right. So if we said these had a density of, well, it doesn't matter. I can just say, let's just make this 10. Okay, so if I make this 10 rowers, then I make this density, that is the distance between these things, so their density. You just change this from 5 pixels to 10 pixels or whatever. So by changing the density of the number of these, let's say in the whole sea you put a number of 500 force bits in the sea, maybe the number 10 would work for an electron. So as long as these proportions remain consistent, it should work fine. Alright, anyway. By what shapes they arrange into? Yes, okay. One critical factor would be the overall light density. Okay, and I'm sure I can't reproduce all the relevant factors for him. I don't know for who, but yeah, there's corners that have to be cut just because you have to cut them. It's like when two forces jump in the boat at the same time. I mean, do you make the boat move from the first interaction, and then maybe it misses the other guy because the boat moved? Those kind of, you're just going to have to create an algorithm that, is consistent, and a lot of this stuff probably won't matter enough to screw anything up. Probably. Alright, so you're willing to pay others a few $100s for finishing your theory. Well, it's not really finishing, is it? I mean, rationally, Einstein didn't have any frickin' CGI animations to go with his theory. But whatever. So you can cash 2 million Nobel dollars. Yeah, well, there's much bigger prizes out there, so, I'm just using Nobel Prize as a generic. You should get rewarded. One would expect you get rewarded for unifying physics. It should, something Einstein spent his whole life trying to do. Probably should reward a person for succeeding in doing that. I'm just saying, it's just what, science has been pursuing answers to these questions for thousands of years. So yeah, you should get something for your trouble. Currently, it's $934,000. Because apparently, the whatever Nobel money isn't worth what it used to be. The dollar is strong compared to Swedish krona, but I agree it's not much for a project that size. No guarantee to win the Nobel Prize either. Can you imagine Gary sitting next to Princess Madeline? The whole thing is quite unimaginable as a farce. But, yeah. I wouldn't honestly dare to watch. Yeah. Well, I myself would probably find it somewhat entertaining. So anyway. So some asshole types his whatever, or gay, whatever this crap is, just to, be irritating? I don't speak whatever that crap is. Why are you typing it to me? Why are you commenting in some other fucking language? I mean, how do you think it's productive? So you force, say if even 50% of the people cared to know what you just said, and they cared and they went and got it translated, they took it to Google and translated it. You don't see how you just caused a whole bunch of people to do a bunch of extra work because you wouldn't do it just once. So you'll waste human lives that way. You're a murderer, essentially. You're murdering people's existence when you waste their time. And this is a preposterous waste of fucking time to type your fucking foreign gibberish on a board where obviously people aren't all bilingual. Douchebag. You see how rude that is? You're one of these little car nuts, a little faggoty yellow car, no doubt, with no fucking muffler, right? Jorge. Fuck you people. Just so rude. Yeah, I should go to some Chinese board and I'll just type a bunch of my crappy English on it for the fun of it. Oh, God, just so fucking rude. And even that wouldn't be as rude just because English is sort of the international language. Okay, maybe that's not fair. Well, who cares? It's a fact. All right. Yours isn't. I guess you want it to be. Fucker. So this is why, you get hated, okay? So I'm just telling you. You want to know why Trump's president? That kind of behavior is why he's president. Fuck. I'll quit with any further suggestions since they're tanking. Yes, thank you. Sorry, but yeah. Backseat driving I don't need. It's a shame that you've worked on this for so many years and there doesn't seem to be any way forward for exposure of your model. Well, eventually I'll be able to break through the crystalline walls of their deluded fantasy land. For what it's worth, I still try to get some answers out of my nephew studying physics and will post anything that might be useful. Yes, well, one of the good questions was to be to ask the physics professor exactly how electrons and protons don't fit the definition of whatever a magnetic monopole, that is the smallest magnetic element, would look like. Because I can't imagine how you could smash an electron and a proton together and not get a perfect magnet. I hope you get some opportunities for progress in the future. Yes, well, hoping is fun. Maybe, I don't know. I watched Ken's videos for the last year until recently. Oh, this is the DT party guy again. I started noticing a repetitive pattern. Well, good for you. It's kind of hard to miss, actually. The videos themselves, he repeats the same line 5 or 10 or 15 times. And then he does this again in the next video. He says the same shit again and again and again, over and over again. Anyway, I'm on the dark side now. Enjoy your analogies better. Well, they're not really analogies. They're assertions, but fine. I have never heard anyone talk such vague nonsense. So this is on the video where I'm arguing that rope theory, throwing a lasso around a donkey's neck, you're not pulling the donkey, you're pushing on the back of his neck, that kind of thing. So that's vague. And then the fact that I've made these analogies, they're rather specific about how energies interacts, that essentially the electron, you hit it and it throws back, something it caught 15 years ago, theoretically. That's being vague. No, that's not vague at all, idiot. That's the exact opposite of vague, is the specifics I'm providing. Amazing. Declare your hypothesis. Of course, I've done that. 2 + 2 + 2 physics. There's 2 force bits, 2 types, electron, proton, force. There's 2 types of matter, electron and proton. Neutron's a composite. And there's 2 kinds of interactions. Reflections. Okay, they're really something goes in and something they had in their pocket goes out. And you gain some momentum. And deflections. That's it. 2 kinds of force, 2 kinds of matter, 2 kinds of interactions. So I have declared my hypothesis, retard. Set up your experiment. There's no experiment to set up. All the arguments in physics aren't about experiments, about what the experiment does. It's about how they interpret the results of the experiment as being conclusive or evidence of something. So it's understanding the experiment. You can do the radar experiment, for example. I could set up the radar experiment to demonstrate radio jamming. I'll send 2 signals, out of phase, and I'll predict the 2 signals will jam each other and you'll get no signal in certain locations. They can set it up exactly the same way and say, no, it's 2 waves and the waves interfered with each other and blah, blah. They can have their whole pile of crap. Now the same experiment, same math, same geometry, same everything. 2 fundamentally different ways of interpreting the results and saying what happened. Kashmir effect, right? I mean, the one Dopey still always is bringing up. Bill Gates. Same experiment. Okay, you take 2 things, all right, and you put them preposterously close together, as close as you can get them, and you're measuring this force, what's going to happen to the 2 objects. Okay, these are metal plates usually, but whatever, it doesn't matter. So you take these 2 things and you move them towards each other. Now you didn't put any charge on them, so they were neutral, no charge, and you bring them together, and there's a force created that when they get to a certain place, it gets very strong force that pushes them together. So and it's more than gravity. So it's not gravity that's doing it. And so they think it's the vacuum energy. So they say that somehow space is doing some kind of whatever, contracting or some kind of bullshit is happening in there. Vacuum energy, they call it. Vacuum something or other. That's somehow making the 2 things move towards each other. When the simple explanation is all atoms have positive in the middle and negative charges on the outside. That's how the atom's made. So all of them have the negative stuff on the outside. So there's negatives sitting here, repulsive to these negatives. Electrons hate each other. So when the 2 things are being brought together, you're essentially bringing an electron closer to an electron. Now, what happens when you bring electrons closer together, right? What happens when you bring an electron, closer to an electron? Oh, sorry about the drawing again. This camera's just not in the right place. I gotta move it this way. Okay, that's so much better. Should have done that from the beginning. So what happens when you bring 2 electrons closer together? They're this far apart, and I bring them this far apart. They repel stronger and stronger and stronger. The closer you bring them, the stronger the repulsion between them. So what basically happens here is that one side, this tension doesn't work. That's not going to work. So one side has to yield. One side, the electrons have to yield. They have to go behind the proton, so to speak. They have to change their polarity. And so one side has to go positive, one side has to go negative. And that's all that really happens. Is that when you bring 2 things really close together, the electrons hate each other, one side has to tilt, and so whatever side had a little bit less positive, a little bit less of a tilt, One side just cascades positive, the other side cascades negative, and now they're compatible with each other. And they're attracting. Strongly attracting. That's all. So 2 different interpretations. Same fucking experiment, asshole. So you people are just so stupid. You think there's some magical new evidence that we can create out of nothing. If there was evidence, then we wouldn't have to have these arguments, would we? What do you have? You have the for gravitational lensing. You have the Eddington experiment, 100-fucking-year-old piece of shit experiment, never repeated successfully. You have these bullshit images from space of smiley faces and some other kind of nonsense. The evidence sucks, asshole. This isn't about experiments. I'm not saying there aren't experiments they should be doing, but obviously they experiment, some of them with photons and all this kind of stuff, have to be out there a little bit delicate, have to be done with some precision. You have to spend some money on them. They spent billions of dollars on this stupid collider. Now they could have spent the money doing radar experiments and 2-slit experiments, but instead they piss it away on these stupid colliders. Anyway, LIGO bullshit, complete bullshit. They should have built LIGO, great, and then take a lead weight and swing it over the mirror and see if you can cause a gravitational effect on the mirror. Shit, that's how they should have done the experiment. But anyway, all right, carry out your experimental observations. So again, the observations aren't in dispute. The interpretation of the observations are what the dispute's about, you dumb fucking ass. We can't agree on what's pushing the Earth into the sun. The experiment's being done every fucking goddamn day, year after year after year. The experiment's happening right in front of our fucking goddamn faces. For hundreds of years we've been aware of that. And what are there? 573 interpretations of that experiment. And measurement and demonstrate the validity of your hypothesis. A process that can be, you're just such a pretentious piece of shit. That can be reproduced by other scientists and generates the same results and conclusions. Well, why don't you just explain how electrons and protons aren't the magnetic monopoles? Or why don't you explain how it can't possibly, in the radar 2-slit experiment, it can't possibly be signal jamming? Why don't you explain? It's called the scientific method. You have no clue. There's no where's the scientific method? Where did the Eddington experiment get successfully repeated? Where? Even though we had a perfect eclipse over North America, right? Even though we have thousands of satellites with very nice cameras on them in space. They've never done it from space. Never. Never. And it was invented by Aristoteles or whatever, the ancient Greece, about whatever. You say so. Who cares? Oh, when did mankind figure out that, you can't take just because something works once. I flipped a coin, it came up heads. Does that mean, it always comes up heads? No, you know that you got to verify it. Wow. Gee, we need an Einstein to figure that out, huh? No, I don't think so. The scientific method is the best technique scientists have that can validate or refute hypotheses. Where's the scientific method in the creation of dark matter? Where's the scientific method in the creation of entanglement even? There's no scientific method involved in this crap. There's no fucking evidence. How can you have a scientific method when you're not even relying on evidence? You're just relying on, the math allows us to create, million magnitude black holes. All right. If you wish to make certain claims, then support them with evidence. That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm supporting them with reasoning. That's all they have. That's all we have to argue about these interpretations. I'm saying it's unreasonable to say photons in the single slit experiments, for example, for no reason at all, decide to split into 2 kind of wave functioning things, interfere with each other, and then land in one location. I'm saying there's no reasoning to support that as an explanation. And there's every bit of reasoning to support the explanation that, when you make the slit smaller, you're obviously increasing the likelihood that the photon traveled very close to a surface, and by traveling very close to a surface it likely encountered some fucking electrons, and electrons change the direction photons travel. That we can establish as a fact. Maybe we could agree on that fact, that most of the time when a photon hits an electron, there's an interaction, the electron moves, and it reemits the photon from a different location, therefore changing the angle of the photon. Fuckhead. Oh, you're such a fucking piece of shit. Weak ass shit. Yeah. Make these assertions, but you don't answer simple questions. How is an electron not a magnetic monopole? If you wish to make certain claims, okay, otherwise, oh no, support them with evidence. Yeah, well, the evidence is only going to be in the form of reasoning, and I have done some experiments demonstrating, for example, that you can make the sacred interferometer pattern, okay, the sacred interferometer pattern, you know, that only can be created by waves interfering, you know, the sacred pattern, the bullseye, right? About the simplest pattern you can make in the universe, on, off, on, off, on, off. That you can make this sacred pattern by just taking a piece of slide glass and putting some dirt on it, yeah, and creating light diffraction. No multiple paths needed, no waves interfering with each other. No, none of that shit is necessary. Okay. Evidence. Otherwise, stop wasting people's time on YouTube. So again, your assertion, shithead. Why don't you quit wasting people's time with fucking accusations you can't back up with any evidence, and that start with an assertion that's plainly wrong. How exactly, compared to Bill Gates, how am I vague in the first place? I mean, he's saying that magnetic attraction is ropes, jumping ropes, hitting each other. Does that do it for you? That explains how attraction and repulsion exist? The strong repulsion and attraction of a magnet is explained by jumping ropes, hitting each other? Fuck you. Vague. Alright. Or are you afraid? So this is exactly the kind of thing. Obviously I'm not afraid. Obviously I'm saying, why don't one of you pussies get in this room so I can humiliate you properly? So why don't you show up in this room so I can ask you some simple questions and see if you have any clue at all? Or you have any explanation at all, how it makes any sense at all? Why don't I just ask you, like, well, if gravitational lensing is creating a focus, how is it doing that with a lens that's inverted? The lens is exactly the wrong shape. It's bending the light on the outside less than it bends the light on the inside. That can't work as a magnifying lens. There's no way to make that into at distance, into a magnifying lens. It can't possibly magnify an image. It can't possibly take a bunch of divergent rays and then send them to a focus. Why don't you explain how your theory makes any sense? Just with that one fact alone. That one fact blows it out of the water, in my opinion. All right. And producing results you can submit for peer review. By what? Your brother-in-law? I mean, peer review by who? What does peer review mean except you believe what we believe? Do you think real peers, like people who actually know what the fuck they're talking about, review what is submitted to these magazines? No, believers do. I might as well submit my evolution theory to the Catholic Church. Why would I waste my time? Oh, fuck you. That must be what other reasons could it be to hide on YouTube. So this is hiding. I'm the one hiding, right? When I'm the one saying, hey Bill, let's talk about it. Hey Dave, let's talk about it. Hey anybody, let's talk about it. And I'll point out where you're full of shit. Okay? I'm not the coward. I'm not the one denying anybody. No one's called me out. No one said, hey, that DraftScience guy won't debate me. No one's ever said that in the history of mankind. So fuck you, you coward, you putrid pile of fucking goddamn shit. Petra. Yeah, you don't even have a real man's name. You fucking pussy. Disgusting cowards. You're a despicable shithead. You know. Really, where do you get off, you fucking piece of shit? Vague 10 fucking years of doing this, whatever, 7, 9, 8. Vague. Fuck you. It's just amazing. All right, anyway. Okay. Can this be true? No. All right, so it's some paper on bullshit. On possible causes of negative sign of gravitational interaction between matter and antimatter. There is no antimatter. All this crap is just that crap. There's no role for antimatter to play. There's no evidence of its existence. It's just bullshit. So taking an Einstein quote again, so they're always doing this, trying to put Einstein on top of their bullshit. Most of the fundamental ideas of science are essentially simple and may, as a rule, be expressed in a language comprehensible to everyone. Yes, you should be able to draw a fucking picture. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Well, clearly, bent space is not at all simple, and there's no simple way to explain it except to cheat insanely. That is, to pretend there aren't 3 dimensions, and you can't bend something in 3 dimensions. So let's see. Based on mass-energy equivalence from special relativity. No, from just logic. But again, there is no equivalence. Into mass energy equivalence, meaning the fact that there's atoms contain pressure, doesn't mean that the atoms are moving. It's like the idea of the rest mass of a photon. If you could actually stop photons from moving, it wouldn't mean the photon doesn't exist, right? It just means that it has no mass. Movement is what gives something mass. You don't have mass unless you're moving. That it's evidenced by standing on the scale, right? I mean, every way we measure mass is really measuring movement. All right. We conjecture simple and clear framework for the purpose of conceptualizing atomic mass generation mechanisms of a single hydrogen. We then apply it to see if it would offer conclusive clarification on the issue of the sign of gravitational so there's no negative gravity. I mean, this is just so stupid. Between Earth and anti-hydrogen atoms at CERN. CERN is out of their league. Frankly, they're just in Deludeville. Our testable prediction. Yes, there's no testable prediction. They're not, none of this stuff at CERN has anything to do with actually watching something. It's a bunch of tunneling microscope kind of bullshit. It's synthesis. It's all synthetic. Nothing real. Anyway. Quantum gravity hypothesis. Yeah, fuck you. So anyway, this is bullshit. Anti-matter is bullshit. Anyway, so all right, so on to seems like I should do the video some other time because I'm now exhausted. But anyway, all right, so the simulation. So as I've demonstrated so many times, the boat analogy, so that's the first thing to understand. So the idea would be to make a field of force, so momentum in a box. So you make a box and you have BBs in it with momentum, and you make it perfectly random, and you make them bounce off the outside of the box to make things simple. And that's it. So that's the energy in the system, just a bunch of little stuff moving. And you make that as dense as you can, and the computer will tolerate. So 500, 1,000, whatever the limitation is. And then the idea is to create the 2 elements that they have 2 different properties. So red and black, or however you want to do it, X's and Y's, it doesn't matter. You have proton type and electron type force. And then you have the matter bits. So the idea would be able to make a charged element, an electron, and a proton. And the idea would be to give them, you have to have the capacity, let's say, to vary how many seats are in these boats, so to speak. So how much energy fits in this diameter, you could argue. How many of these little bits could fit in the diameter of it? So how big these things are has to be variable. So you start with these little things, and then you just make these things So you can change their size, the proton size and the electron size, and the size will dictate how easy it is to interact. And you should almost have it so you can make them negative sizes, so the electron could actually be smaller than the force bit if you need to do that to make them move properly, in terms of creating the right number of interactions. So you have the seats in the boat of the electron. That has to be a variable. Whether it's odd or even will be sort of important. But the seats just mean that every direction that anything can hit it, it has a alignment of momentum. So at any one moment it can go in any direction based on that composite. Now obviously you can't do an infinite number of lines, so I would just keep it to, you know, a certain number of, even just the 3 dimensions, in, out, up, down, left, right. So even if you just did the 3 dimensions and averaged everything that was a little bit, like if something hit here, you just say, okay, it really hit here, you know, to do the math. So you just change those 3 dimension lines. So the electron would just be understood as 3 dimensions, 3 lines. And wherever something hits, you just put it to the lowest, the nearest line, and you just change a seat in that line in terms of exchange. So the idea is that the electrons just are like a boat, they just exchange. So when a force bit hits, so force bits are randomly bouncing all around. When a force bit hits, it basically goes into the boat, into that dimension, whatever the nearest dimension is, and it gives back something moving in the opposite direction. And the clear consequence will be is this will have, it'll change the momentum of the electron. It'll move in a different or new direction, subtly changed based on the averaging of the 3 dimensions. So its vector changes. Maybe just cut it to 2 dimensions to make the model work easier. Really, they're calculating the forward and back motion will just get complicated, but probably worth doing. But well, anyway, all right. So you have the force bit density, you have the number of seats in a dimension, and then you have that'll already create the motion of the electron and the fact that the fields will change based on these reflections. So it should take care of itself. So the idea is that the proton energy will, so now we've done the 2 kinds of force, right? Proton force, electron force. I should draw them in a different color, and then there'll be less confusion. And obviously the simulation should identify them as a different color just to keep things understandable. So there's 2 kinds of force bit, randomly moving to start with. 2 kinds, and I draw them the same color. Yeah, well, it's been a long life. Getting a bit tired of it. All right, 2 kinds of force bit moving in random directions. And then you have these 2 kinds of matter bit of variable size and number of whatever seats. And the simple fact is that if a red bit hits a blue bit, it's deflected. And the idea would be it's deflected in one of the perpendicular dimensions. And if a blue bit hits a proton, the same thing would happen. It's deflected. But if blue hits blue, the blue bit goes into the boat, takes the seat, and the opposite is let loose. So an opposite leaves, and the other part will take care of itself. The moving of the electron will change just based on the fact that you've changed who's sitting in the boat. And likewise, for the proton, the red force goes in and there's a reflection. Now I would argue that this proton has an even number of seats. Okay, so make it 10, and the electron would have an odd number 9, and therefore the electron would never be stationary, and the proton could theoretically be stationary a lot more often. They'll be wobbling a lot less than the electron will be. Alright, so the variable has to, you have to make these variable size, and I just make the size based on how many seats are in the boat. Yeah, and then the other part's going to be the creation of, if the simulation can't create a dipole, which will be kind of interesting to see if it can, but if it can't, you have to be able to make a dipole to do magnetism. So, you have to be able to make a structure where the electron and proton are very close to each other, and then you put other dipoles in the environment and see what the other dipoles will do when you place them somewhere, what's going to happen based on these rules. And what should happen should be kind of obvious in the sense that they'll turn and attract. The other thing might be is that if you can make these dipoles, the rule would be is that the direction of which way the force gets deflected would be more obvious. That if the blue force hits the red, it goes through the dipole, and likewise if the red hits the blue, it goes in the direction of the dipole, so it comes out the red. So that would be the change it would make, is that when they're in close proximity, there's no longer a deflection in any direction. There's a deflection in the direction of the nearest opposite charge. So that might be a rule that needs to be in. It might be a rule that's here in the field by itself. It might be something that happens all the time. I just can't say one way or the other. I mean, the simulation will sort of demonstrate that if that's the rule. So if this electron has a proton over here, then the deflection would go in that direction. The deflection of the red energy would go in the direction. But the key point is it obviously doesn't push this item away. So when they're really in close proximity, you don't get this interaction here because the two have a neutral zone. So it goes through that neutral zone. Yeah, so there probably is a rule just for magnets. But the rule for magnets would be is that the deflection is in the direction of the opposite charge. Alright, see what else I have to say. So I think the boat analogy, we could call this, is the boat analogy. The idea that the force just jumps in a boat and it gives back something going the opposite direction. Then you have to make sure the drag is in there. Well, the drag will take care of itself, right? Because it's just what hits it but you might have to have a way to increase the drag quotient, just because the density of the force is going to be kind of lower than the real density, so the drag effect might not be realized with just 500 little BBs. And to get the real drag effect, you might have to amplify the drag effect, which is when you're freely moving, you're going to be retarded by the fact that you're moving into more force. Alright. Yeah, so size yeah, I think that's all there is. So it's not that complicated. There aren't that many variables, but I just mean you have to make size variable and density variable, and some of these functions might need which way the deflections happen might need to be variable, and that you can make it more likely to go a right turn, so to speak, right hand rule kind of thing, or something like that. Well, you should be able to get, you got enough of it. There's enough there, I think. Yeah, I mean, you want to do it right the first time, not have to rewrite it eventually to create more functions. So I just want to make sure I'm not forgetting some kind of ratio that you can change. So as long as we can vary the size of the electrons, how many seats are in the boat, yeah, the rest of it should take care of itself, hopefully. Alright, so enough video, and until the next time and such. Sorry, people are just so irritating. Yeah.